Alright, so now I'm back with Devil May Cry 2, and man, I was honestly extremely close to finishing this video by the time I was asked to review Daymare, so yeah, let's just go ahead and finish this up now. So Devil May Cry was a success both in Japan and over here in America, and after that success, a sequel was quite inevitable, with Capcom bragging that it would be at least 10 times as big and bold as the last game. Is that true, though? Well, that's what I'm here to find out. New to DMC2 is the second playable character, Lucia, who, in the original PS2 release, had her own disc signified by the selection screen in the HD collection, which I will be using again for this review. Oh, this collection is so convenient. So I'm going to be doing this in 4 playthroughs. I'm going to be doing Dante in normal and hard, I'm going to be doing Lucia's campaign in normal, and I'm also going to be doing a 4th run with the character Trish. Without further ado, let's get started on the game, and what better place to start than the story. Devil May Cry 2 opens with Lucia being ambushed by demons while we get a narration about Sparta and his son Dante before Dante kinda rescues Lucia from a situation she could have easily escaped from, but Dante wanted to look cool. Lucia then leaves, giving Dante a location on the convenient map on where to meet her next. Very much like DMC1's story is very light. Most of the story is just Dante killing demons on the way to defeat this guy called Arius, and whatever building-sized monster the day comes by. Lucia is the real main character of DMC2 though, as evident from half of Dante's campaign having no actual story except finding Arius and him getting away. Lucia is supposedly a descendant of a devil tribe that protected Vie de Malie, and is told of Arius' ambitions when Dante shows up and saves her, which is followed by talk of the different Arcana items that Lucia is going after to defeat Arius thanks to this old lady that raised Lucia named Mathieu. Once Lucia gets to the helipad, she meets Arius face to face where we end up learning a bit more about her. It turns out that she's actually a defective mannequin that Arius created, and all things considered, Lucia takes this rather well when she's suddenly thrown into another place and has to fight a boss. Once you get through some awkward swimming sections ripped right out of the first game, Lucia travels all the way to Arius at his gigantic office building before being captured, with Dante showing up soon after, holding all the Archon items and simply handing them to Arius before fighting him. Afterwards, the building explodes, with Arius getting away and Dante saving Lucia from the explosion. Lucia is worried about her true origins, but Dante kinda just shrugs it off as there's more important things to worry about at the moment. Dante goes through more missions and kills Arius after he finishes an apparently borked ritual, where afterwards, Lucia demands that Dante kills her, but he refuses as, first of all, devils never cry, and 2, the portal to the demon world kinda just opened up and he needs to take care of it, which he soon does. While Dante finishes off the demons in the demon world though, Lucia is confronted by a more powerful Arius, very much looking like a Form 4 William Birkin from Resident Evil 2, but Lucia finishes him off supposedly for good this time. Shame too, that was Dante's only good line in this game.
Yeah. Here's your crown.
Once Lucia sees that the gate back home closes for Dante, she goes back home worried, but Mathieu reassures her that Dante will return, and considering how well this game was received, it might not have happened in another time, but Lucia goes to visit Dante's shop holding his coin that he had for some reason in this city, and lo and behold, Dante comes back. And that's it. Overall, it's a very simple story, albeit too much at points, though somehow DMC2 manages to have an even more inconsequential story than DMC1 did, at least for Dante. What all really happens in DMC2 besides Dante going to stop some pompous Dracula wannabe from opening another portal to hell? Nothing. This is so easily skippable, it's not even funny. Voice acting is about as good as it was in the first game, but something that's very upsetting to a lot of people is how stoic and boring this Dante is in comparison to Dante from the first game, no longer cracking jokes and trash-talking bosses.
Don't speak. Just die.
This actually extends to the gameplay too. There's no taunt button anymore, which I miss a lot. That's not the worst of the changes to the gameplay in this sequel. Devil May Cry 2 keeps the tradition from DMC1 of only having one attack button, but unlike DMC1, DMC2 decides to make it so that you have a surplus of different combos, changed by whether you press a direction or not while executing the default combo, with that now being 4 hits instead of 3 like before. It's a bit hard to explain, but it basically means that you can do the combo and put in a direction, it doesn't matter which one, after the first swing, and that will result in a different combo. Same goes for if you press a direction on the second swing, and vice versa, and that's pretty neat once you get the hang of it in a big group after 2 or 3 missions. DMC2 has a similar lock-on system to the first game where it locks on via proximity, and if you hold R1 you'll be able to stay locked on one enemy until it dies, and you can change targets by pressing L3. This wouldn't be much of a problem if DMC2 changed how you executed Stinger and High Time with Dante along with Lucia's equivalents of those moves. This means that in order to do, say, the 6-hit combo with Dante, you have to press attack twice, let go of lock-on, and pray that Dante doesn't target another enemy while pressing a direction for the combo, because I assure you, he will. I should note that this only applies to Dante and Lucia, and not the unlockable Trish, which is something that people complained about back during the release of the first game. Trish is unlocked by completing hard mode with Dante, which requires beating the game twice on a single save file with Dante, and you have to clear normal with both Dante and Lucia to even unlock hard mode for either character, totaling at 3 separate playthroughs. So how does Trish handle in this game? Exactly like Dante would in DMC1 with the Devil Sword Sparta equipped. So why is the default control scheme so different for Lucia and Dante? Well, I'll get into that near the end of the video. DMC2 keeps the mission structure of DMC1 without many changes, though you can very easily notice at the end of the missions that you're ranked on more than just time and red orbs like before. The final rank takes into account your time, damage taken, orbs obtained, overall style ranking, and items used. Secret missions aren't a thing anymore, rather replaced by these secret rooms that challenge you to kill all the enemies they throw at you to get blue orb fragments like before, plus these white orbs that refill your devil trigger. Wait a minute, what's this magic meter they're saying here? That's the devil trigger gauge. Okay, well maybe it's considered the magic meter for Lucia, but still, you don't just change things like that. There's also the new Bloody Palace mode that's really just an endless horde of enemies for you to beat up, and otherwise it's extremely dull. I really didn't care to go past many levels of this, but there is a trophy that you can get for clearing 9,000 floors, which is feasible in due time, but I ended up getting extremely bored of this by the 10th room, and I only got to the 1,000th floor. Another thing that changes in DMC2 are the divinity statues, or more specifically, what you can buy from said divinity statues. In DMC1, you had to buy abilities for Dante like Air Hike or Stinger, for example. In DMC2, you have all these moves by default from just starting the game, likely causing you to ask, gee, what's the point of these outside items now? Well, I'm glad I could pretend you asked, because the answer is upgrading your weapons to be stronger, I think? Honestly, I can't tell the difference between an upgraded or non-upgraded sword. The items are handled a bit differently now, however, with small and large variants of the Devil Trigger and HP restorations, along with a visible maximum of how many you can have in your inventory. Honestly, just get blue and purple orbs, it's all you'll ever need. The upgrades to the swords and guns are barely noticeable, if at all. Remember how I said weapon variety was a bit lacking in the first game? Well, here it's practically non-existent. Dante and Lucia get count them, 3 different types of swords that all control exactly the same, and besides cosmetic differences, all do the same things in combat. Talk about lazy. Speaking of the swords and guns, the guns alone are all that you need to beat this game, and that is absolutely nothing good at all. At least until you remember the changes that DMC2 already made to this game. Remember how in DMC1 the guns didn't make an enemy flinch, let alone completely murder them? Well now, your default handguns are capable of not just damaging an enemy absurdly, but also juggling them, stun-locking them, and with how many airborne enemies there are in this game, it can also make them fall onto the ground with ease. And don't get me started on how absurdly good the guns are in Devil Trigger for Dante and Lucia. Those eat boss health like nothing else. Speaking of Devil Trigger, man does DMC2 love it. You get super armor for attacks like HP regen like in the first game, but new to DMC2 is the ability to augment your Devil Trigger with different items, some making you go extra fast, others letting you change the element your Devil Trigger uses, like fire or ice, and whether you focus on damage or health or the like. You can mix and match each of these 3 different rune types however you like, which I honestly think is really neat. There's also this Majin Devil Trigger that Dante has, which can only be activated at extra low health, which I only managed to even get at the tail end of hard mode since this game is otherwise far too easy to get that low on health. Majin Devil Trigger is basically a bigger, badder, and more powerful version of the normal Devil Trigger, with a lot more range than you'd otherwise expect. However, some of the enemies are just absurdly annoying to deal with when they actually attack you. I'm not going to bother going through the whole rogues gallery this time, but know that some enemies, like the Ice Wolves, are an absolute pain to hit without the guns, not helping being the lock-on that ignores walls. There's also multiple goat enemies that can sometimes armor through you due to their sheer size, but they aren't too terrible, just a middling amount of annoying. Though much like the first game before it, DMC2 has its fair share of bosses, like this flower thing that isn't designed well, a giant metal suit, the only legitimately fun boss in the entire game, and is that Phantom? Ripped right out of the first game at all? Well, I'll be. Next you're gonna tell me Griffin's future. Oh, come on, really? Griffin was made in the Mundus fried chicken last game, and now you're trying to tell me he's still alive? Get out of here. Most, if not all, of these bosses have some cheap design on them that really bog down your playtime like nothing else. For example, none of the bosses can be stunned or flinch from your attacks, which in DMC1 was decently fine as action cancels were a thing, letting you dodge roll in the middle of a combo. Here, though, you can't do that, even with the dodge being its own specific button now. On top of this, there are very few attacks with any wind-up, meaning that more often than not, you're better off shooting them from far away, even without the guns being as powerful as they are now. Not all the bosses are like this, like Dante's final boss, which is very well designed for what it's worth, but it still feels cheap at points. That is, if it's even something you can hit with melee attacks, with the infected helicopter, giant moth, and these 3 floating heads being completely immune to melee thanks to sheer distance, meaning you're just holding shoot and occasionally dodging. Isn't that fun and engaging? No? I think I should probably mention that the game feels more balanced around Lucia, as she can move faster, has an easier time knocking enemies over without her guns, as when you get the SMGs with Dante you really shouldn't use either gun, but Lucia's combat style emphasizes mobility over everything else, so that really does fit into this game better than Dante and his extra straight back do. Though that might just be because of their differing playstyles being more refreshing once you finish one campaign. Despite all of this though, Devil May Cry 2 is pathetically easy compared to DMC 1, with the enemy AI being very questionable at points in normal mode, though they're a bit more aggressive in hard mode, but not enough to matter, as unless you're locked into a room, you can just run away from enemies if you don't feel like fighting them, or just watch an Aussie pull off combo after combo on an enemy that can't do anything to you because it's the infected tank. DMC2 puts much more emphasis on exploration and missions compared to the first game, with each mission having at least 5 city blocks worth of space, plus the devs bragging that the areas are at least 5 times as big as in DMC1, though what that really means is a lot of copy-paste areas, though after the first third game with either character, the areas are a bit more confined and do stand out more easily. I will say that the music of this game is pretty good, especially Dante's second battle theme being my favorite in the entire game, plus some recurring themes and background music. It's a lot less noticeable than the first game, which, well, I didn't talk about in the first game. I do think it's fantastic, and I prefer that over this game's soundtrack as well, but there are good tracks here, like Dante's first battle theme called Fire Away, which... yeah, that sounds about right. Overall, though, the worst part of DMC2 to me is that it just feels so bland and forgettable despite small quality of life changes that the game makes, like letting you swap your guns on the fly without having to pause the game, which I absolutely love, or changing the quality and quantity of items you can buy in the first place to feel a lot better. But despite all this, I still don't really know what to make of DMC2. It's unfocused, bland, and uninspired, but can be somewhat fun in the right mindset, especially in the second half where design gets reasonable. Now, with all these problems that Devil May Cry 2 has, you're probably wondering how it even got to that point in the first place. Well, it actually all started during the English localization of the first game, where Capcom told Hideki Kamiya while he was writing the translation, giving the okay for it, that they had already started work on a sequel without him. And needless to say, he was pretty upset about that. The game had already gotten very far into development by the time Capcom decided that the developer wasn't doing a good enough job of it and didn't know what kind of game he was making before they fired him, which unfortunately we don't know the name of said developer, and replaced him with Hideaki Itsuno in the last few months of development. It's kind of sad that he had to put his name on the line for this, because he had already worked on other stuff like Street Fighter Alpha. But DMC2 is a rushed, kind of bland and unfocused mess, and is it bad to say I like some of it? Don't get me wrong, I do agree that it's a bad game, but some of the things in the second half of this game, along with Lucia's campaign for the most part, are very fun to go through. It's one of the parts of the game that actually feels like thought was put into it, and I like that. Really, I think this game could be way better if it wasn't called Devil May Cry and was just something else entirely. It's very weird. There's parts of this that I like, but there's just the overall package that I'm not sure what to feel about. But DMC2 ended up getting bad to mixed reviews upon its release, and I can't really say that's an unfair judgment. But fortunately, the Devil May Cry series continued on after this with Devil May Cry 3, which we'll be looking at next time. So without further ado, I'll see you guys next time.